let's talk about Licorice Pizza, the new film by Paul Thomas Anderson, which, if it's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, I gotta watch it. That's how it goes. Having said that, I did miss Inherent Vice when it came out, but I'm planning to see it. Okay, but Paul Thomas Anderson is one of those directors that is just has had a pretty darn good track record. Okay, there hasn't been a miss really in there. Although, again, I hear Inherent Vice is not that amazing. As far as I'm concerned, from what I've seen, there hasn't been a miss for Paul Thomas Anderson. It's just been like one really solid film after another. Sometimes the film is so good that it's just a masterpiece, you know. So that's why I'm really interested in seeing anything Paul Thomas Anderson puts out, because there's a good chance it might be a masterpiece. You know, I rewatched Magnolia just the other day, just still freaking amazing. What can I say? So I was looking forward to Licorice Pizza. Didn't really know what to expect. All I had to go on was the trailers, and the trailers I thought looked solid, looked interesting. It's definitely interesting enough to get my ass in the theater before the movie disappears, because it's not like it's the biggest movie ever. So it's not going to be in theaters like for a very long time. So I made sure to catch it before it disappeared up there. And yeah, from the looks of it, it looked to be kind of your typical coming of age story set in the 70s with the Haim sisters, apparently. I'm not sure why, but there you go. And, some newcomers. You had Alana Haim, who plays the lead girl in it, also called Alana. And you've got Cooper Hoffman, who is actually Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, and he plays a character called Gary, who is also the lead in that. So it seemed interesting as well from that point of view. You've got some newcomers just playing some really big roles, so that'd be interesting to see. You have kind of an interesting cast of characters as well. Like, I remember from the trailers, they show you Sean Penn's in there, So it seemed interesting enough. This movie, there's actually there's actually a lot to talk about and not much to talk about in a weird way, because in terms of the story, there really isn't much to talk about, because the story is not a particularly story-driven film. It's just a bunch of stuff happening to these young characters, and it takes them in weird directions. You know, it's that kind of movie. It's not really like, oh, there's like a beginning, middle, and end, and then we've got our, our big adventure. It doesn't really work like that. It's kind of it's almost you expect it to be an ensemble movie, but it's not. It's more in the vein of something like American Graffiti. If you've seen American Graffiti, it's the same kind of thing. You don't really have like a core story. You've just got like a bunch of characters, and you kind of follow them here and there and see what happens. Except here, it's not an ensemble piece at all. You're just really focusing on Alana and Gary, and what they get up to. Even though the story is very slight, there's a lot to talk about. Now, we're gonna start with the opening premise. Okay, this movie does not hide its opening premise, as problematic as it is. The opening premise is basically you've got this young actor called Gary Valentine, and he is in school, and there's a girl who works in the school played by Alana Haim. And she is older. She's like 25. And then he is meant to be 15, even though, okay, he doesn't look 15, but like he's meant to be 15, okay? And he starts hitting on her, like pretty hard, like from the beginning of the movie, okay? He's like, this is the girl I'm going to marry. He's like flirting with her. She's sort of not, into it at first, but like she's flirting back. And already this movie, like there's a lot of people and I can definitely see why, are not going to be able to make it past this relationship. This is right off the bat. The movie puts it out there. It's like he's 15, she's 25. They like each other. Enjoy. And that's the beginning of the movie. And I think like this movie is going to fall into two camps. You're going to have the people who are irked by this relationship, who are just like, fuck this movie, what the hell? I don't want to see this. The second camp is going to be people who defend this movie from an artistic standpoint, okay? And I think, honestly, there is value to both these trains of thought. I think, you can really explain this kind of relationship through the prism of, it was in a different time. The movie doesn't really show anything too explicit or explicit at all. By the end of the movie, the guy is actually meant to be older. It's a coming of age story. It's more about their thought processes, how they changed, etc. These characters are not really portrayed as being particularly smart. They're not portrayed as making very good decisions throughout any of this movie, okay? And that's actually the fun part of the movie, but we'll get to it. And also, I think it's good for movies to challenge people, I also think there was really no need for that. And I'm more leaning towards the other side. I'm leaning towards the side of this kind of sucks as a premise. Even for a coming-of-age story, it's unnecessary, and it's putting a black cloud over a movie that otherwise would have been totally fine. If you had Gary be 16 or 17, and then she's 18 or 19, I don't think that would have been, no one would have given a shit. And I feel like you could have still told the exact same story with the exact same message, and it would have been just fine. I just think the way they did it here is it's just asking for the audience to be what the fuck? And it's just it's distracting. It's too distracting from the rest of the movie. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think it's actually a huge mistake by Paul Thomas Anderson. I have no idea why he thought this was a good idea. Now, I will caveat all this by saying that this is a semi-autobiographical kind of story, right? A lot of this stuff didn't really happen to him. It happened to his friend Gary. So there is that element there as well. It might be that he just heard that someone went through stuff like this, and then he told the story from a very kind of innocent point of view. Here's what happened, kind of thing. Yeah, without thinking too much about how it would be perceived at all. And so there's probably an element of that as well. But let's get to the story, and then we'll circle back to this. Gary is first portrayed as, he's an actor. He's on a stage show with an older actress who I think is meant to be Lucy from I Love Lucy. I think that's who it's meant to be, the old lady. And there's actually a few characters in this movie that are meant to be real people in real life, right? Some of them are named, John Peters. You've got John Peters, the producer of Batman, 1989, and other movies as well, I think Wild Wild West, and lots of movies at Warner Brothers. Very eccentric guy. To just listen to Kevin Smith, tell his story about meeting John Peters when they were working on Superman Lives. Just listen to that hilarious story. That'll tell you everything you need to know. But basically, you've got John Peters, played by Bradley Cooper. You also have Sean Penn playing a character who is basically meant to be William Holden, but they changed the name to Jack Holden. So it's weird. This movie has some real people in it with their names for real. Some of them are changed. It's a bit strange. I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to name drop too much, which I respect, actually. But yeah, it just comes off as a little strange sometimes. But anyway, so this is kind of set around kind of Hollywood. It's in the Valley, right? So Gary is this actor, young actor, very confident, very bold. He wants to start a business. He wants Alana to be his girlfriend. She makes it sort of clear early on that she's not, interested in him like that exactly. And also she makes a point of saying that he's too young. She thinks it's weird that she hangs out with these young guys all the time. Although I think you can make a very solid argument that she is full on grooming this kid, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. If you look at this relationship through the lens of nowadays, you're like, wow, she is full on grooming this kid. There's no two ways about it. Okay? There's no two ways about it. If you look at it from an innocent, very charitable, it was a different time kind of thing, you might be able to squirm your way out of that. But it really, even in the movie, even when they make a point of having her say stuff like, you're too young, fuck off, kind of thing, it's so half-assed, the way that she does it, that it's it's a bit groomy, isn't it? Anyway, so again, if you can get past that, let's continue with the story. Because she's not portrayed as, being a groomer in this movie. She's just kind of she's portrayed just as innocently as he is. And that's a recurring thing that's a recurring theme in this movie. You've got the adults acting childish, acting very juvenile, and you've got the kids trying to be grown-ups. And this movie is good in that it's very good at exploring this the way that Hollywood kind of switches the roles sometimes and makes a mess of that. Unfortunately, the core relationship of that is problematic throughout and doesn't really gel very well with the main point that it's trying to make. I don't know what this is meant to be. This is kind of like you got a crocodile on here. Here you got a big snake. Crocodile, big snake, don't get along. All right? This is... Apparently, that's a demonstration of what this film's about. But yeah, so you got Sean Penn, who's just kind of like this hotshot actor who wants to show off, and he's on a bike on a golf course jumping over freaking rings of fire, and he's like, he crashes and burns. Not really, but like, you've got John Peters, who's completely unhinged. He's like this 40-something-year-old guy trying to hit on young girls. Meanwhile, you've got the kids, like Gary, who is starting waterbed businesses and pinball businesses. He's flat out, he's on stage, he's working, starting businesses, he's hitting on, older girls. And again, you've got Alana, who is very spontaneous, very wild. Like, she can get very angry very quickly. And she's more childish, right? She really doesn't have her place in the world at all. So that's a very interesting part of this movie. And, there's also the kind of sleaze of Hollywood, the positions that Hollywood puts people in, whether they're kids or adults, is fucked up. It doesn't gel. It's like licorice and pizza, if you will. It doesn't really go together. Although, obviously, that's not necessarily what licorice pizza is meant to mean. It's meant to mean like a record, like an old vinyl record, right? Which looks like a licorice pizza. But I like to think of the title as also meaning two things that don't go together but somehow are, like Hollywood and real life, And it's interesting. There's interesting themes in this movie. The movie looks awesome. Like, how sometimes when they make a movie, say in the 80s, they lay it on way too thick in terms of the look of it, and it doesn't feel legit. Here, I think the cinematography gets it right. It's just grainy enough. It's just kind of... The colors have just faded enough that it actually looks of its time, And now, there's still a few things. There's a few little things about this movie stylistically that feel a little bit forced. Like, you've got the soundtrack. You got a lot of Bowie in there. You got a lot of obvious songs in there thrown in, and you've got a lot of running. You've got a lot of running in this movie. You got a lot of people running. For whatever reason, to the sound of a classic, 70s song. And that's fine. It's just a little bit, in a movie that's as long as this is a long movie. It's well over 2 hours. And I feel like you could have easily cut out a good, at least 15 minutes, if not half hour from this movie. Easily. Now, you've got, going back to the story... You've got Gary starting a waterbed company that obviously falls through eventually because it's waterbeds. There's eventually by the end there's an oil shortage because it's the Nixon years and it's a whole shit show, and so that falls through, and he starts a pinball business later on that also falls through. Apparently, you can imagine it does fall through. Meanwhile, you've got Alana, who is also trying to get into acting, but that falls through. Gary coaches her to lie on her resume as much as possible, say yes to everything, and she says yes to way too much. And there's actually a really good scene with this actress who plays BB in Frasier. She's amazing. She plays the agent. She is so freaking good. In the small part that she has, she's got such an expressive face and an amazing voice. I think she should be in everything, this woman. She is so funny. So funny. And this movie, overall, is pretty funny. The problem is, there's a lot of awkwardness in this movie throughout. Not just, linked to that core relationship, but the humor is very dry sometimes. To the point where it's I don't really know if I should laugh about this. There's a part of the movie where this guy, I forget the name of the actor. He's a good actor, actually. I really like him. He's in He's in a lot of really funny comedies. But this guy keeps being racist to his Japanese wife, and I just didn't get that. I didn't really get why that was meant to be funny. Or in the theater, you had some kind of nervous laughter. You were like, what the fuck? I was more like, what the fuck is this? Like, I didn't really... This character is not important, really. He's only important in as much as a Japanese restaurant is an important location at some point in the movie, but that could have been anywhere, really. Yeah, I guess it's to portray the kind of casual racism of the times, but I don't know what this has to do with the main story. I feel like you could have easily cut that out. They could have easily cut that scene out entirely. Like, this happens twice as well. They could have easily cut those scenes out. It's not that funny. Yeah, it doesn't really help anything. It's just, again, more awkward stuff to put in there for no reason. And then you've got, when that falls through, because Alana gets close to Sean Penn, but Sean Penn is way too self-involved to really give a shit about her. And so that falls through. And then she goes to work on a political campaign where once again, she kind of makes a fool of herself. She finds that the situation that she found herself in, that she thought she had well in hand, is just not what she expected. It's a coming-of-age story, but they don't really come of age. They kind of just keep making mistakes. Some of them very similar mistakes. But they roll with the punches, they have fun along the way, and, it doesn't seem to really mess with them too much. They just keep on moving. And I guess that's what all the running is meant to symbolize. To cut a long story short, I don't think this movie was that great. I think this movie is very good in some parts and not good at all in other parts. It's the worst Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I'll tell you that right now. It's the worst one I've seen. Everything before that, again, I need to check out Inherent Vice, but everything before that has been better. This movie just felt needlessly awkward. Again, core relationship, I'm going to say it's just a mistake. It's not necessary. It's very out of touch with movies being released today. It challenges the audience, but the payoff is not worth it. The payoff is literally, spoilers, they get together, and it's just more odd than you would, it's just as odd as it was right in the beginning. So if you were going to do that, at least have some kind of character arc exploring how fucked up this relationship is and why it can't work. Or, another way that you can kind of like rationalize it is like, well, you don't know that it's going to go well for them at the end. Alana might end up in jail for real. But I think they could have like made this a little bit clearer. I think, you could have fleshed that out a lot more. And I feel like for a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, this movie felt surprisingly bare in terms of saying something about the times, about these characters. I felt like he, introduced a whole bunch of stuff at the beginning, and then we kind of just sitting there seeing that stuff not really bear fruit, but just kind of like stuff happening around them, And it's a little bit disappointing. The cast is fantastic, though. The cast is fantastic. Sean Penn's amazing. You got Tom Waits in there for a minute. He's very good. The two, young leads, Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman, revelations. They do such a good job. I really want to see these two in better movies. I want to see them in better movies. And actually, it was kind of interesting to see all the Haim sisters and their dad, and I don't know if it was their mom as well. Like the whole Haim family is in this movie, and they're good. Like they're good at acting, and I've been listening to their first album since it came out, and that first album is freaking banging. If you haven't heard the first Haim album, you gotta listen to it. It's one of the best new albums I've heard. Like, so freaking good. The second album, not so much. I was not into that one at all. But what are you going to do? Now comes the hard part. Do I recommend this movie? I don't know. I feel like if you miss this movie, you will miss out on some good stuff. You will miss out on some awesome performances from the whole cast, really. You're going to miss out on that. You're going to miss out on Bradley Cooper being freaking hilarious as John Peters. You're gonna miss out on that, and that would be a shame. That would be a shame. Sean Penn, he's in the movie for like 5 minutes. He's very, very good as well. Everyone is. So you're gonna miss out on that. You're gonna miss out on the cool cinematography. You're gonna miss out on the kind of cool vibe of it all. This movie is one big vibe, and it's good. Like, it's a good vibe. And then you've got a cameo. I noticed a cameo of John C. Reilly as Herman Munster. That was genius. That was actually genius. That was some genius cameo there. But the vibe is kind of ruined, you should know, by, again, the core relationship and the problematic aspect of that, and a kind of very dry script and weird kind of sense of humor, and the fact that by the end you're not really sure why you sat through all of that. Yeah, that makes it tough. So I would say, if you think you can handle it, if you think you can look past this movie's like very, very early weird premise, stick with it and just enjoy the good parts. Try and enjoy the good parts, because it's still, even though it's not great, it's still a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and it's worth watching because some elements of the movie are so good that it's gonna be a shame if you miss it. Having said that, for just kind of like a mass audience, I would not recommend this movie. I think it's too long, it's too awkward, it's too unclear about what it's trying to say, and it's too weird. The correlationship of it is going to be a huge turnoff right off the bat. Again, huge mistake. I don't know why the fuck he would do this. But yeah, I enjoyed aspects of it. Bradley Cooper, I hope, kind of wins a supporting actor Oscar, honestly. He deserves it because he was hilarious. He really channeled John Peters like so well. I loved it. And even actually the whole truck sequence was really, really well done. I like that a lot. And it's a fun movie, okay? It's a fun movie. This movie has some fun parts to it. Even though the way I'm telling it doesn't sound fun, there's some fun parts to this movie. It's just, and overall, as long as it does have this kind of light atmosphere to it. It's like American Graffiti. You've got this kind of light vibe to it. It's a long movie with the quite dense movie, but at the same time, it's light and vibrant. The only problem is, you've got this other side to it that's kind of a turn off. But what can you do? So that's my review of Licorice Pizza. It's like licorice and pizza. Parts of it are gonna be licoricey, parts of it are gonna be pizza-y. Okay, and it's not gonna go well together. But I do like licorice. I do like pizza. So I appreciated, more about this movie than I think a lot of people are going to. So thank you for watching. See you in the next review.